Good evening, and thanks for joining us on The Week in Review. I'm Brandis Friedman. Nick Blumberg has the evening off. After weeks of threatening to send the National Guard to Chicago, President Donald Trump says he's choosing a different city, even if he said he would have preferred Chicago.
We're going to Memphis. Memphis is
That's the next city.
Deeply troubled. And the mayor is happy. He's a Democrat mayor. The mayor is happy. And the governor, Tennessee. The governor is happy.
That despite Memphis police saying crime is at a 25-year low so far this year. Meanwhile, Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials fatally shoot a man in suburban Franklin Park while carrying out an enforcement operation. An officer was taken to a hospital with, quote, severe injuries, according to ICE. It comes amid ramped-up immigration efforts that have neighbors, especially in Southwest Side communities, concerned.
A lot of unfortunate ICE activities in the Arlington Heights area, in Cicero, in Berwyn, which is treating our community the way they should not be treated.
Despite immigration concerns, organizers of Mexican Independence Day celebrations are moving forward with their events.
In less than 36 hours, the suspect was apprehended.
In Utah, a 22-year-old man is in custody, suspected in the fatal shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. And questions remain after the Bears flop in their season opener. But team officials make it clear they want out of Chicago for Arlington Heights. But can they do it without the state's help? And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Olivia Olander of the Chicago Tribune, Shruti Singh of Bloomberg News, Francia Garcia Hernandez of Block Club Chicago, and Rob Hart of WBBM News Radio. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and welcome back. Olivia, let's start with you, because DHS confirming, of course, what we just heard, that an ICE agent fatally shot a man in northwest suburban Franklin Park today. Bring us up to speed. What happened?
Yeah, this is obviously a developing situation, but it looks like an ICE agent did fatally shoot someone in the suburbs of Chicago. Governor Pritzker has called for full transparency on this issue, but it seems like at this point we just have the report from ICE for what happened, neighbors who heard some gunshots, saw police cars, that sort of thing. But this just comes during a really tense week for immigration enforcement in Chicago, and it kind of just, feels like this something, bad happening. It just comes in a really tense time in the community.
And what did ICE say happened? That the man was trying to run over the agent with his car?
Yes, and a neighbor told the Tribune that they felt that the man, might have just been panicked, something like that. It's really not clear at this point exactly what was going on, but yeah, that is what I said happened. So obviously still waiting for further details.
Right, and there's reports that he ended up, like you said, maybe he panicked, whatever the case was, that he ended up dragging this ICE agent with him
Yes.
along the car. So that agent is in the hospital getting
serious
treatment.
Injuries.
Yes. Francia, ICE has also announced earlier this week, they announced the operation of, they announced the launch of Operation Midway Blitz. What is that intended to be?
According to the Department of Homeland Security, it's intended to arrest undocumented people in Chicago and Illinois. This is after weeks of President Trump threatening to send the National Guard and immigration officers to Chicago. Governor J.B. Pritzker this week talked in Pilsen and said 100 agents or 200 agents are expected to be here, and they have been seen in the community. There has been a surge in calls to hotlines to report ICE sightings, and there has been an uptick in arrests according to community groups, but that remains to be seen as to how widespread and whether these numbers are higher than before these launch.
Right, because it feels like we're not really getting any real numbers. Like, we know what ICE has said through their press releases and on social media, but do we have any sense of how many people could be getting arrested or have been?
It is unclear at this point. The Department of Homeland Security has issued press statements just mentioning some people with charges that were detained as part of these operations, but they have not indicated whether they were arrested in Chicago or Illinois, when they were arrested, and whether they had any criminal charges in some cases. In others, they have said they were among the the worst of the worst. Community groups say they have seen an uptick in arrests. They have seen a few confirmed arrests, but they don't have numbers either. So at this point, we don't know how widespread these arrests have been.
Right. Rob, we had weeks of talk and speculation about what would happen this week. Did the alleged raids, did whatever ICE did this week, did it turn out to be what many people feared?
Well, at the present time, we are still, in a sense, a state of anticipation because state officials, Governor Pritzker, they say they believe that more immigration and customs enforcement personnel and officials are on their way, that they will be operating out of Naval Station Great Lakes in North Chicago. But at the present time, the hard numbers are still very low. You're hearing about maybe 13 confirmed arrests so far, and some of those arrests actually took place out of state. And the reality, of course, does not meet the hype that has been presented on social media. Last week, we were promised Shypocalypse now, and the reality has not met the meme as of yet.
Reality hasn't met the meme. I'm going to use that one, Rob. Olivia, same question to you. How would you compare what was expected to what we actually saw this past week?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about just a little over a week ago, we were expecting potentially actual National Guard to be in Chicago's streets, just like they were in Washington, D.C., and that obviously has not materialized with the president kind of backing off of that. But still, we've seen that significant uptick in there's like 500 hotline calls to a top immigration helpline earlier this week in just a single day. So obviously people are seeing ICE out. There are these arrests, and activist groups are reporting some more than the 13 or so, the dozen or so that have been reported by ICE. But yeah, it's unclear right now. It just seems like people are seeing ICE agents out there, not the National Guard, not other things that we may have expected, but they still are on edge because of it.
Shruti, as an observing journalist, how do you read all of the things that we've seen happen this week in this space?
I think this is one of the many challenges that cities around the country are facing right now, right? They have fiscal challenges, they've got political issues that mayors are dealing with, and so this is just layered on top of everything else that's going on.
Right, that added pressure from the federal government, depending on which city you are, of course. And the president earlier on this week, he seemed to hedge on whether or not the National Guard would be coming to Chicago. And then, of course, today he switched it up entirely. Here's his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, she was talking about Chicago a couple of days ago.
We have a government here that does not want to cooperate with President Trump, and he wants to come in here and he wants to help this city. He wants to clean up Chicago and its suburbs.
Olivia, is it likely that the messaging from Governor Pritzker and Mayor Johnson worked?
The president said earlier today, that Democratic leaders were resisting in Chicago. I mean, I'm sure it would be nice for Pritzker, to think.
Would love to claim that,
to claim
yes.
that. It's not really clear though. There was also the Supreme Court ruling just a few days ago that said that what Trump did in Los Angeles with the National Guard, was not lawful. So that may have played into it too. It's hard to know, but yeah, as you said, things really have changed in the last few days on that subject.
Rob?
It's, from a political standpoint, even if the National Guard doesn't set foot in Chicago, it could potentially be a win for the White House and for President Trump, because every weekend, every day, there is a crime that takes place in the city that garners national attention, and the entire conservative media apparatus is going to be keeping an eye on every bicycle stolen in the city. And if anything happens, it'll be presented as, see, this is what happens when you don't ask for my help. So it could potentially be a political win for the White House, even if the National Guard never shows up.
Francia, is there, still the chance that next week that we see continued escalation of ICE efforts in Chicago?
That appears to be the case. Early reporting suggested that ICE agents would be here for 30 to 45 days. And Governor Pritzker has warned that he believes we haven't seen the most of the enhanced enforcement yet. It is hard to tell because ICE doesn't really give us a detailed plan of what's happening, what they're planning to do, or whether they'll be detaining people here or there. But organizers on the ground, neighbors, and officials are preparing for that in case that continues to happen, and urging neighbors to continue to know their rights and report calls to the hotline and be organized.
And of course, meanwhile, there are reports that the president does have cooperation from leadership in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis has a Democratic mayor, and of course, Tennessee has a Republican governor. But the president says that's where the National Guard is going because he's got cooperation there. What's the latest there? Anyone? Francia, what's happening in Memphis? Do we know what the president is saying?
Other than those comments, I'm not sure we know much more other than, that's the plan. I haven't seen any other reports of what the plans are for Memphis.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll call us and tell us what the plans are. So, of course, as all this plays out, immigrant and immigration rights advocates, they're responding to community fears. Last week, there was a report that El Grito, the festival, was going to be canceled. There have been some updates to that this week. Francia, what can you tell us about what's happening with El Grito?
Yes, there was a big festival supposed to happen downtown in Grand Park. El Grito Festival supposed to draw thousands of people to the city to celebrate Mexican Independence Day. That got canceled amid fears and threats of ICE operations. There is a smaller celebration happening in Pilsen, put together by local community leaders and organizers, who will host it at a local church. It was initially going to be at a public plaza, but they're saying they'll do it at a church to keep people safe amid the concern of ICE raids. There's also the Mexican Independence Day parade at Little Village this Sunday, and organizers have stood firmly and said they will continue to do it amid the threat of ICE raids. They're organized. They will have organizers on the ground, they'll have lawyers on the ground, and they'll have safety measures in place. Some of the organizers are urging people, if they're undocumented or they feel they're at risk, to stay home and watch and celebrate from home.
You also reported on the impact of all of this on Latino-owned businesses. What are you hearing?
Yes, we've heard from the start of this week that fear and anxiety have spread among community members, and they're not visiting the commercial corridors that they usually frequent. They're not going to stores, and the foot traffic is down in places such as 26th Street, the Little Village commercial corridor there, or Archer Avenue in Brighton Park. So this is what we're hearing. I was out in Little Village Monday, and yeah, there were less people outside, and business owners told me they've seen less people dining in, shopping, and their revenue is taking a hit just from last weekend. They're expecting that will continue to be the case as long as ICE is here.
Okay. Okay, so the other big sort of political story this week is, of course, the issue of political violence. Conservative activist Charlie Kirk being shot and killed while speaking at a Utah college. Rob, remind us who Charlie Kirk is.
Charlie Kirk, who is the founder of Turning Point USA, also a Chicago area native. He was from Arlington Heights, Prospect Heights, went to high school in Wheeling, and developed a social media following doing what he did when he was shot on Wednesday, which was going to colleges and in some cases getting into ideological arguments with people who disagreed with him, but where his bread and butter was on social media, because those interactions with people with whom he disagreed were edited down and caught fire on social media, was very shareable, and if you were looking for something to back up your argument, you could always refer to something that Charlie Kirk had said. And as a result of that social media following, not only was there a Turning Point USA, there was also Turning Point chapters in other countries. Like, that's how influential he was, and he was very much a part of the Trump administration, the Trump campaign effort to register more college students in 2024. And also, he was the pioneer of some social media tactics that the Trump campaign adopted last year. If you look back to the events at McDonald's and the garbage truck and the anecdotes about Arnold Palmer on the campaign trail last year, it didn't make a lot of sense from a traditional media standpoint, but once it was sliced and diced and sent into the social media algorithm, it was designed to make him look very good. And that was a social media persuasion tactic that was pioneered by Charlie Kirk. So he was a very influential person when he was shot this week. And a 22-year-old is in custody, arrested in Utah. His father turned him in based on the images that were sent out by law enforcement this week. And once again, we have this very familiar dance now of there's a shooting. What was motivating the gunman? What were the gunman's political beliefs? Here are all the 17 different angles on the video, which was available everywhere. I saw a promoted video today on Instagram showing the graphic video of Charlie Kirk being hit by a sniper's bullet. So that's just part of the world in which we live in today.
Certainly stunning and unfortunate that is the world we live in. Shruti, what was your reaction when you learned about this week? And what does it say about political violence in our country right now?
I think, just as Rob was saying, there's just a lot of heated rhetoric right now, and I think that we're all watching to see how all this unfolds.
What are we hearing, right? What have we heard from President Trump and some of his supporters, Olivia?
Yeah, it's been, I would say, sort of a mixed bag from different folks in the Republican Party, but a lot of calls of anger that this happened, some calls, to not respond with violence to this violence. But yeah, I mean, this was someone who was clearly revered on the right, and especially among younger Republicans, a lot of Republicans that were really aligned with Trump. So I think if you just, this is something, as Rob said, that we really saw play out on social media, scrolling through X, it was impossible to not see these kinds of reactions from Republicans, anger at people on the left who had said, maybe inappropriate things about Kirk's death. It was just a really divisive time to be on social media. And someone who clearly meant a lot to people on the right.
Yeah, to millions of followers that he had. Also, Olivia, this afternoon, Governor Pritzker issuing an executive order on vaccine access. What does this mean? What did he do? Yeah, so no actual new guidelines yet on vaccine access, but Governor Pritzker is responding to Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has, narrowed some of the uses of vaccines for younger people, for kids, and also, made some moves at the CDC that have really angered some Democrats and public health officials across the country. So Pritzker with this order is saying, we're going to put together our own set of recommendations, not sure what they're going to be yet, but they'll be coming out actually for the fall, it seems like pretty soon based on the press release that he sent out today. And then based on that, providers will be able to administer vaccines. Not clear yet exactly what the cost is going to be because, one impact of some of the federal actions might be that some things are no longer covered by insurance that used to be. And it looks like from the order that cost might be helpful for some people, but maybe not all Illinoisans who have different types of insurance. So still kind of some things to shake out on that. But Governor Pritzker is, joining other blue governors, other blue states in responding to the Trump administration on this. And it will potentially change some things for Illinoisans getting vaccines in the fall. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
So advocates for people who are experiencing homelessness this week, those advocates are pushing back against the city's clearing of an encampment at Legion Park. Francia, what happened this week?
Yes, so there was an encampment at Legion Park that was cleared out by the Park District with the help of Chicago Police this Tuesday. This was after the most recent incident. There was a fire on July 28th and it erupted, and that made the Park District decide that they would close down that encampment. There were some wooden structures in the encampment. So this was just not tents, there were some wooden homes that had been built along the riverbank, and those are the homes that got torn down this week, Tuesday. Obviously, these came with mixed reactions, with protesters and housing activists saying this is not a solution, and some of the encampment residents saying they'll just move to a different park now, or they'll find another solution, but they don't want to go to a shelter. Meanwhile, other neighbors were happy about this and said, they had been concerned about fires breaking out at the camp. Some of them have been saying, they had been attacked or had worried about their safety and their children's safety using the park. So this was a mixed reaction, but ultimately a lot of housing advocates and protesters said, this is not a real solution. They're just getting moved to a different park or a shelter or elsewhere, but they're not really getting a long-term housing alternative.
Shruti, give us a little bit of context on how the city has been responding to its homelessness, its housing situation.
Yeah, so homelessness has been an increasing problem for Chicago since the pandemic, and one of the things that the Johnson administration had backed is the Bring Home Chicago referendum, and they wanted to levy a higher rate on home sales above, say, $1 million, so higher valued homes. That referendum did not pass. And so the concern that the administration has expressed is that here was a solution that we had brought forth to provide some funding for a problem in the city. And, there's questions about, whether it'll come back at some point and where the funding will come from. But this is certainly, homelessness is a problem that Chicago is dealing with, as well as many other cities around the country post-pandemic. And there will have to be some questions down the line about where does that funding come from, what are the logistics, what are the operational steps that these cities are taking to address this problem.
And Shruti, you also did some reporting this week on CPS, going to the bond market for the first time in 2 years. Yeah. What'd you find out?
Well, debt and bonds and loans were a big topic during the CPS budget season, leading all the way up to just like the last couple of days right before the budget vote, which in itself was very tense and came down a little bit to the wire. Yesterday, the Chicago Board of Education sold $650 million worth of bonds in the municipal bond market. Now, a couple of things about this is that CPS is the largest junk bond issuer in the U.S. municipal market. What does that mean? It just has a much lower rating, non-investment grade rating, than many other school districts around the country. And that means it pays a higher interest rate. It pays investors more to borrow that money. So I had actually talked about this last time I think I was on this show, is that about a month ago, the junk market was not doing as well. And so it looked like it was kind of a risky time for them to come into the market. This week, actually, the junk market had turned around a little bit. So it became an opportune time for them to actually come. They still paid more than 2 years ago, but a little bit less than expected.
A little bit less than more.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit better.
But the debt and loans have been a big topic for CPS because it has such a large deficit, and the debate during the budget season was whether they should take a short-term loan for operational expenses and potentially use that to pay the city for a pension contribution that they decided not to do. So this was a different type of loan. This was for things like roofs, technology upgrades, infrastructure, that kind of thing. This was not for a, paying somebody back for a pension contribution. This was capital expenses.
Okay. Briefly, Olivia, 2 new Republicans throwing their hats into the ring for the Republican nomination for governor. Who are they?
Yes, so we have Darren Bailey, who is new, but actually not so new because he's definitely run for the Republican seat for governor before, the Republican nomination, and won. Assisted, obviously, in the past by Governor J.B. Pritzker, who, did kind of help him in framing himself as the most far to the right Republican just a few years ago. So this time he is running again. He's picked in his lieutenant governor, Aaron Delmar, who is a little bit more of a moderate, someone who's more from Cook County, whereas Darren Bailey is known for being from further south. So that race could end up being a rematch, we'll see. But someone who's trying to make it a new race is Ted Dabrowski, who is someone who is known for Wire Points, which is a conservative publication. And he had his campaign announcement earlier today. One of my colleagues reported that he didn't take any questions from the media at that announcement, but something that he will have to answer for at some point is his time associated with Governor Rauner and the budget crisis at that time. So, I mean, this could end up being, maybe a competitive Republican primary, but obviously Governor J.B. Pritzker coming in as the incumbent and the Democrat in a very blue state has all the advantages here.
They'll all have to take some questions about this, obviously. Go ahead, Shruti.
So one of the things I want to point out is the governor's race here in Illinois is going to be closely watched nationally, because what happens in the governor's race, could indicate also what the governor's prospects are later on and what decisions he makes in terms of any higher office.
Okay, so let's talk about the Bears real quick, because are they just talking a good game? See what I did there? About leaving the city for Arlington Heights? Or Shruti, I'm going to come to you first on this. Can they actually pull this off? What did they say this week?
I mean, the open letter from CEO Kevin Warren laid out a plan that the Bears would move from Chicago to Arlington Heights in a property that they've already bought a couple of years ago. And in this letter, he said that they are not counting on state funding. Previously, in the plan that they presented last year that had the backing of Brandon Johnson, by the way, the mayor had stood right next to Kevin Warren and wanted this development to be in the city of Chicago. But in this letter, they said no state funding is required, and previously they had wanted some municipal debt and some other assistance. Now, he did leave some room open in terms of negotiations with the state because they're looking for some sort of property tax action that would affect their property in Arlington Heights. But, you know, I think this was as much of a sports fan story as it was a public finance story, because the question is, what are they going to get?
What are they going to get? Okay, well, we're going to have to find out some other time because we're out of time. My thanks to all of you, Olivia Olander and Shruti Singh, as well as Francia Garcia Hernandez and Rob Hart. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation. Additional support is provided by
And that is our show for this Friday night. Be sure to sign up for our free email newsletter, The Daily Chicagoan, at WTTW.com/newsletter. Now for the Week in Review, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe and stay informed, and have a great weekend. Okay, so you said this is as much a fan story as it is one about municipal finance. Rob, what do the fans think?
Well, they're obviously the traditionalists want to stay in Soldier Field, but this is such an easy decision. The Bears have wanted to be in Arlington Heights since 1975. Soldier Field was a stopgap in the 70s. The current arrangement is a stopgap. They plopped a modern stadium on top of the colonnades to keep the landmark designation. It's difficult to get into and out of, which is ironic for a downtown stadium. You're a tenant of the Park District, and you go to Arlington Heights, you own the land. You own the stadium. The train goes right to the front door. It just seems so simple.
And they're looking to, if things move along this year, the letter also said that
closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports inclusionary excellence throughout the legal profession.